Alright, it's been a couple years since I did one of these things. I don't want to waste too much time. The only things I wanted to mention is that I did not record my initial playthrough, so all of the footage you're going to see is taken from other YouTubers. I will link to them in the description below. The other is that all of this is based on my first playthrough impressions, while two-handing my grafted greatsword. Obviously, based on the build and the time of your encounter, your experiences can vary greatly in this game. I'll be taking into account boss arena challenge, concept, originality, enjoyment, music, and more. I'll be including every boss with the title Great Enemy Felled appearing upon defeat, and all of these were completed solo, no summons at all. This isn't an objective list, it's just my opinion. Let's get started. Number 33, Godskin Duo. This boss pissed me off. I've ranted about it to my friends enough, but I'll restate the problem. This is a gank fight with two individually designed bosses who both have an insta-trigger range attack when you heal. The pillars that you can use for cover are destroyed mid-combat, which is your only reprieve from their aggression, and each enemy is not designed to trade aggro. They both attack you at the same time. On top of that, killing one doesn't leave you with a one-on-one. You have to keep fighting both because they resummon. This is not fun, and to top it off, they're both copy-pasted from a previous area in the game. This is the only boss I can genuinely say I can't stand it. Number 32, Fia's Champions. This boss has a potentially decent idea, but plays out relatively poorly. It's basically the standard NPC boss fight, but there are multiple stages with a variety of enemies. It's not offensively bad or upsetting in the way Godskin Duo fight is, but it doesn't really even feel like a boss fight necessarily. I like the idea of like the tiered battle where you have to fight your way up to the final part, but this just isn't executed very well. Number 31, Mimic Tier. Again, a fight with a potentially good idea, but poor execution. Fighting a clone of yourself is enjoyable, but NPCs have a clear disadvantage. You've likely reached the point of mastery on this build and can easily outclass the clumsy AI at this point. Perhaps if the Mimic was scaled to a higher level than you, then this could have been a worthy boss, but I can't deny that I had a lot of fun beating the crap out of myself. Number 30, Magma Wyrm. Oddly enough, this boss's mechanics feel ripped straight out of Dark Souls 1. It slithers along the ground aimlessly, similarly to the Gaping Dragon, and spews molten vomit out like Quelaag. The fight is again not offensive in any way, and I do enjoy the visual design of the monster, but it's not something too memorable. To top it all off, it is reused quite a bit. I didn't hate it, but it's not a particularly mechanically intensive encounter, and it's not one that I'm going to remember for too long. Number 29, Valiant Gargoyle Duo. Another one of the copy-pasted duo fights. This one is much more manageable though. I do enjoy how it is a subtle callback to the Bell Gargoyles of Dark Souls 1, considering at half HP the other drops. I also like how this gives you time to nearly finish killing the first gargoyle. The gargoyles are well-designed enemies, and the extra time allows you to even the odds. It's much better than the Godskin Duo, but it still has a lot of the same problems with copy-pasted duo bosses. Number 28, Godfrey, First Elden Lord. I was immeasurably disappointed in my first encounter with the Golden Spectral Lord. His attacks were slow and telegraphed, like a kid's version of Godric. This was my reward for climbing to the top of this golden city. A golden turd? Okay, it's not that bad. It's a solid fight with fun dodge timings and enjoyable music. It was just quite underwhelming with all the build-up. Also, the fact that he was like this golden specter kind of reduced the character he had, because there was no color and vibrancy coming out of him other than just this washing of yellow light. Of course, this is all because it was just a preview of something more down the line. If a future boss didn't exist, this would definitely be higher up, but because it does, there's no reason to have this any higher than it is. Number 27, Godskin Noble. I actually fought the Godskin Duo before I ever met Fatty, so I guess that first encounter may have left a bad taste in my mouth. I don't necessarily enjoy his plethora of hard-to-read, large AoEs, though his rolling can be fun to dodge through. We're like rolling buddies. Perhaps this boss deserves a more respectable position, but on a first playthrough he didn't do too much more than annoy me. Number 26, all the flying dragons. There are a lot of dragons in Elden Ring. They're placed sporadically throughout your journey, containing different elements and twists to keep the fights engaging. They're not the best fights the game has to offer, but the spectacle of fighting a dragon is certainly enjoyable, and engaging one on horseback makes it all the more exhilarating. These bosses could have offered more, but what they do offer is plenty to quench my thirst for dragon slaying. Number 25, Leonine Misbegotten. As I did not achieve an exhaustive search of this world, I did not meet many of the copies of this original boss. However, that first encounter was thrilling. The boss is quick and aggressive, combining a Bloodborne-like aggression and bestial presence with the calculated swordplay of Dark Souls. The fight is frantic and fun, and is a worthy challenge in the early game. In a worse game, this would have been a middle-of-the-pack fight, but competition in Elden Ring is so severe that it leaves this line thing all the way down at 25 out of 33. Number 24, Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. Loretta would certainly place higher if there wasn't such an enormity of bosses on horseback, from the annoying tree sentinels to the more fun knight cavalry. You've been doing these fights for hours at this point. Thankfully, Loretta provides enough of a twist and visual spectacle to keep things interesting. While she isn't particularly difficult, she dishes out an enormous amount of damage, and her spells and archery keep you watching closely. I personally like the blue hue to all of her spells as well. It just looks nice. Number 23, Commander Nial. When I first faced this menace, I was furious. The amount of damage his summoned knights did reminded me of the worst gank bosses of the series. Thankfully, with the newfound freedom Elden Ring provides, I was able to leave and come back at a more suitable level. His battle became much more interesting. Thematically, fighting a commander who has soldiers at his side makes sense, and his ability to rally and buff them was not quite as infuriating at a heightened vigor level. His attacks have an unreasonable amount of cinematic quality to them, and fighting an ice warrior atop an ice castle with lightning sparking between the two combatants can't be ignored. Not perfect again, but would be a beloved fight in a lesser game. Number 22, Sir Gideon Offnir. The All-Knowing! While I must admit, the story details of Elden Ring remain elusive, even as I completed the most followable Soulsborne journey. But seeing Offnir in this battle sparked my inquisitive mind. His words post-defeat were scornful and haunting. Unfortunately, as I faced him, I played with unrelenting aggression and was able to stun lock him fairly easily, blocking most of his moveset from even being utilized. Upon a quick YouTube search, I saw the asshole had a huge array of sick moves that I was never able to see. I suppose he could place lower due to not even using half of his moveset against me, but I feel that there is thematic and design depth, even if it remains elusive to myself, and that warrants a higher placing. 21, Elemer of the Briar. This fight is all the trappings of a battle that would be unbelievably obnoxious. A knight who can throw his sword while you're trapped in a tiny room makes me think of Capra Demon. Sad face. Thankfully, the fight is actually quite challenging and fair, and exhilarating. The blood hue to his sword is just nice with the low glow of light in the room. It's visually appealing, and it's a fun, challenging fight. Number 20, Regal Ancestor Spirit. This is an example of a battle with palpable atmosphere. There are quite a few bosses still yet to be named that utilize atmosphere and weight to convey their value rather than challenge or grandness. This battle is sad. It's unfortunate. I don't know the greater context of the story, but it doesn't matter. I'm traveling into this beautiful creature's world just to slaughter it. Conjures images of Sif, yet this feels greater. The music swells, the deer glows, and you want to leave the arena and leave the beast to live. Each move is majestic and graceful. Again, the soundtrack just blows me away here. I love the vibe. This one, great boss. Number 19, Dragonkin Soldier. In stark contrast to the previous entry, Dragonkin Soldier takes the spot solely on its spectacle. The arena is unforgettable, with the giant corpse decaying on a dazzling throne as this behemoth drops between you and your destination. The lightning-infused attacks remind me of a more fleshed-out Dark Beast Parl. Not a perfect fight mechanically, or in terms of the challenge necessarily, but it's definitely an unforgettable one. Number 18, Godskin Apostle. The soundtrack! In all honesty, this Slinky is a beast. I loved learning his attack patterns. I first met him out in that creepy-ass windmill field, and his buffed attacks deliver on every level. I only don't really like his ranged attack, which he seems to be programmed to throw every single time I heal. Stop, please. Number 17, Red Wolf of Radagon. I love the colors of this fight. The glowing red wolf and the glowing red sword dashing around the room with blue magic to follow. The speed is exhilarating, the pace is unrelenting. The boss may be slightly undertuned on the HP side, but hits like a truck to compensate. It's a fast, unbelievably enjoyable fight. This did Wolf's right in a way we haven't seen since DS1. Number 16, Margit the Fell Omen. If it wasn't for another variant of this fight, this would be much, much higher. It's a near perfect challenge, stopping players dead in their tracks, encouraging them to go out and explore. conjure some more strength, because you're going to need it to take out the first real boss of the game. This is this game's Gascoigne, Abyss Watchers, Genichiro, and it comes so early. I love the intro cinematic as Margit sneers at your pathetic ambition. I love the variance in attacks present because of his conjured weapons. The setting on the bridge is breathtaking, and the mix of slow and fast attacks always keeps you on your toes. It forces you to learn the mechanics of Elden Ring, and this is an unforgettable first fight, and I cannot believe this game has so many good bosses that this amazing of a boss drops down to number 16 for me. 15, Astel, Naturalborn of the Void. Again, this is an absolutely dazzling fight. The visuals of this may be a perfection on the terrifying components of Wolnir and the beautiful components of the best FromSoft has to offer. Kinda reminds me of Amygdala, but even cooler. Its arena and scale is jaw-dropping. My only complaint is that for a creature so unbelievably daunting, he does not pose a particularly strong threat. I never really had to learn the moveset because I could tank most hits and not get too punished. Other than that, perfect. Dragonlord Placidusax and Lichdragon Fortisax. Unfortunately, the one boss I haven't been able to face is Lichdragon Fortisax. I accidentally killed Fia. Don't ask me how. Because of this, I tried to face a mini-boss I'm told is similar, a lightning dragon. Unfortunately, I didn't feel I was able to get the full experience, so I'm placing here alongside Placidusax. I would possibly place Placidusax higher, but he also ended up bugging out on the last third of my fight against him, forcing him a bit lower. But the teleport dragon attacks were sick. I love the obscurity of the boss. It took so much to find him, and the strangeness of the design. It was this dragon boss that delivered in nearly every way. Love the lightning attacks, the way he does the phase 2 transition, and you're just frantically searching around the arena like, where the frick is this guy coming from? Just, I don't know. Something about the fight just really... It reminded me of Nameless King a little bit because of the way you're in that like other world and you have to do this obscure thing to find him, and then it's a dragon fight. Just great stuff. Loved it. Number 12, Radagon of the Golden Order. I wasn't sure if I should group this boss with the boss it comes with, considering you fight them together. My reasoning as to why I split them is because this is a completely unique and distinct boss fight with its own health bar. So for example, when people are rating Sekiro bosses, a lot of the time they split Ishin with Emma, and that's just because they're totally different fights, even though they come together. So that's what I did here. This fight is visually captivating and remains at such a powerful climax to the story. It's mechanically fluid. My only gripe is some of the AoE attacks can be a little bit frustrating to deal with, but the way that his delayed attacks hit, it throws you off your game, even though it's not necessarily too challenging. The visual spectacle, the pacing of the fight, and the story and climax. Oh, and when the theme music comes in, oh, that's a huge highlight of the whole game for me, because it's really only there for that title theme. And when it came back in, oh, I felt the heroics of this game finally hit its stride. Number 11, Fire Giant. They finally did a giant fight right. Woo! It only took like a while. The cutscene transition to phase 2 of this fight genuinely shocked me and confused me. I wasn't sure if I should be disgusted or in awe. In any case, the mechanics can be somewhat frustrating at times, but the scale, spectacle, and care that was clearly gone into this insanity is palpable. Fighting a giant atop a mountain, covered in snow, and actually having it be executed well, whew, this is good stuff. Good stuff from. Number 10, Renalla, Queen of the Moon. I could see why some people may not be quite as fond of this fight. In my opinion, every boss from here on out is definitely worthy of a 10 though. The first phase is essentially the Deacons of the Deep from Dark Souls 3. However, the context is so unbelievably different. I was dispassionately mowing down nameless, faceless zombies in my mind as I slaughtered the Deacons. I may have had the story wrong, but as I know it, I'm laying to waste these resurrected school children as an abandoned queen holds on to the last thing she holds dear. I felt sorrow as I slaughtered them in this understandably easy battle. Then the phase 2 hits with one of the most beautiful arenas and attacks. I found her somewhat easy with an aggressive playstyle, but this mage fight is worthy of the higher echelon of FromSoft's catalog. And when she actually is able to summon a dragon, she balances that newfound adversary in the arena with her tempered aggression. So it's just a very balanced fight, it's very fun, and it's beautiful. Has a lot of weight behind every single blow. Number 9, Starscourge Radahn. Upon my first victory against Radahn, I was conflicted. This was the only battle in which I used summons, as it was in the spirit of the festival, but it felt like it was uncalculated. Obviously, this conjures images of the old iron, or the Ivory King, the burnt ivory, something like that. It conjures images of him as you go to war together, but I don't know. The arena was there, the spectacle was there, but the attacks felt aimless. I felt like it was just kind of random. I couldn't have been more wrong though, as I have viewed solo runs with 0 hits taken. It is possible, and the scale of the battle is there. I think this is one that will climb with familiarity. I suppose I'll have to wait and see. That phase 2 transition though, as he dude freaking lands as a meteor into your arena. I got one shot first time, of course. The build-up is just, it's so fun too, just heading to war with the pot dude. Number 8, Hoaraloo, Warrior. The first half of this fight had it set to be in my top, just, it was one of my favorites. The dodging is perhaps the most enjoyable in the entire game as you weave attacks between parts of his attacks. The second half is a little bit less fun for me though, because he's just so aggressive. The grabs are plentiful, and I don't really like getting grabbed, I'll be honest. It's like a weaponless version of Champion Gundyr. You got that wrestling approach. I did love the cutscene, but I found myself so frustrated that I couldn't heal over and over again as he jumped at me every time I tried to. It's really nice to have one of those more straightforward fights where a lot of this stuff in this game comes off as so over the top in like the best way. This fight really does tone it down in terms of the grand scale of things and just has a warrior versus a warrior, and you really feel the weight of the fight. It's hard with these top 8 because literally every single boss could be swapped with another boss depending on the day, and I expect my opinions to change drastically over time. If I look back at my Sekiro rankings that I did a couple years ago, I would probably already swap like half of those rankings around. And this game, with the way that different builds are used and stuff, I think I would swap even more often. Number 7, the Elden Beast. Now I've seen some people have conflicting thoughts about this boss, and I'm going to go off script for the rest of this video because I kind of just want to casually talk about these. Elden Beast is one of the bosses that I expect to be a little bit polarizing in the community. Kind of is not fitting necessarily in the game, just in terms of like its visual design and also kind of how the fight works. I think that's there for a reason. Thematically, I think this beast is of another world, of another universe potentially, and I think that's supposed to be communicated through its design. A lot of the enjoyment of this boss for me comes down to one simple word, and it's atmosphere. Throughout the series, we've had a lot of these atmospheric finales, and the classic one people go to is Gwyn, and I'm gonna be honest, I do really love Gwyn, but I think this blows Gwyn out of the water. Gwyn, the reason he's fun is because, okay, he's a husk of his former self, but in reality, the fight still comes down to you're fighting like this king in a cave with a glowing sword, and he kind of just spams like R1 attacks at you over and over again, right? This boss has such a beautiful cinematic look to it, and the way the music swells so differently than any other FromSoft track I've ever heard. Almost reminds me of like the Misa theme from Game of Thrones. I honestly, the experience of fighting this beast is not something I can really even describe in words. It's kind of something I just had to experience, and when I, closed my door, turned the lights off, and had the game up and first encountered this boss, I don't know, it's kind of just a moment I'll never forget. It's so different from the other FromSoft stuff. It does run away a lot, but I don't mind covering that ground. That kind of reminds me of like Demon of Hatred, but this is not nearly as challenging or as much of a slog, in my opinion, even though I love Demon of Hatred too. This is a much quicker fight. I loved how it felt so foreign, and that's probably going to be divisive for some people. Number 6, Godric, the Grafted. Now, this boss is one that I've struggled with figuring out where I want to rank him as well, because I think every single thing is perfect about this fight, except for one thing, and that's the difficulty. His attacks are slow and telegraphed, and I was able to beat him on my second try after I went in with like knowing I wasn't going to beat him. I had like a +1 weapon or something, and then I came back with like a +5, and I feel like I just two-shotted him. And it was just a weapon you get right at the beginning, so I feel like the boss, considering he comes after Margit, and Margit is like so challenging. In my opinion, Godric was really easy, but I did see other people struggle with him, so that's what got me to push him up higher, because I think it wasn't just a me thing. His attitude, though, he's just so like, he's so like scornful of you. He just hates you. Like, how dare you even think you're worthy of like walking around here? And his absolute insanity as the fight continues, and he grabs the dragon. That's such an epic cutscene. I love that. Love it. These really fun attacks to dodge. It's just, again, the difficulty isn't fully there for me, but maybe on subsequent playthroughs with different builds, that's where the difficulty will come in, and we'll see. Still, as he stands, just what a fun fight. Number 5, Ricard, Lord of Blasphemy. Now, this is probably going to be another slightly controversial one, but in my opinion, this is by far the best. I don't want to say gimmick fight because it's not a gimmick. I don't even know the word to describe it. Okay, we'll use we'll use the word gimmick for now. It's a gimmick fight, but it still has all the trappings of a normal battle. You still use a weapon. Only thing is everyone's using the same weapon, and the weapon's enhanced. And that works so well here because you have to take steps back for this massive scale creature to work. And that lets you be able to take in everything. So you're not just chipping at his ankles or something like you do with a lot of these massive bosses. You actually get to play from range. And I don't think there's anything in this entire game that was more satisfying to me than using that weapon on Ricard. Now, obviously, it's not my number one. The cutscene, the way the serpent spoke was so weird and like laughable. I legitimately started laughing, but then I realized like this is a lizard that devoured a god that's trying to mimic his voice. Like, it would sound ridiculous. That makes sense. I don't think there's anything in the game that's scaled that big. Like, the way, like, he basically conjures, like, skulls from the sky and it's like this tornado. It's just one of the most intense and epic battles, I think, probably in the whole series. I don't think there's a more epic battle than that one. Number 4, Morgott, the Omen King. Now, if Morgott didn't exist, Margit would be in my top 5 maybe. I think I like him more than Godric even. He is amazing, but Morgott is even better than Margit. I will admit, like the first time I got up to that throne and I saw him again, I was like, aw. Like I was looking for something new, but this fight delivers so much new to the battle. And the way he has so much more movement and aggression in this battle. He has so many new attacks. His blade is amazing. Just absolutely one of the best fights. Number 3, Malenia, Queen of Rot. Okay, so I can't really give a full opinion on this boss because I still have yet to beat her. It's been over, I don't know, 60-something tries, and I'm still really not that close. I've only gotten her to phase 2 a handful of times, and learning that phase is proving to be difficult because I can't get past phase 1. Difficulty is great, but that flurry attack is pulling this boss way down. If they removed that, just simply removed that from the entire fight, she'd likely be my favorite. She might take the first spot. Until then, she'll remain here. I cannot even begin to explain how beautiful that phase 2 is, though, with the butterflies flying out from behind her, just this blast of color in the arena, and you see the little flowers resembling like the Gehrman fights and the Ishin fights of the series, and the scales there, the difficulties there, the wonderful animations are there. Just absolutely fantastic, but the healing and the flurry attack, it's just so much. It's hard for me to know if I'm going to actually enjoy fighting her. Definitely the hardest boss I've ever faced in any FromSoft game, personally. I don't think I've ever taken this many tries to beat any boss in their game ever, and I'm still not even that close. So, yeah, that's a rough one. I'm not sure what I want to do with this ranking. Oh my gosh. It's so stressful with her. I've seen people try for hundreds of tries and still not get it, so who knows. Number 2, Mog, Lord of Blood. Now, this fight could have the potential to be frustrating because of the endless amount of AoEs and blood damage and then the phase 2 transition where you get hit, but I actually loved all of it. I don't know why, because sometimes that stuff can be frustrating. The darkness and intensity of this fight is so palpable. The gravity of it all. Every attack feels so weighty, and it feels like you really are taking down a lord. The phase 2 transition is what really did it for me, though. Like, that whole sequence of having to frantically use your flasks and then him being able to now fly around the arena with all these like enhanced attacks. It just, the music too, again, just, whew. Number 1, Malekith, the Black Blade. Now, this fight was so hard for me in my first try. Oh my god, I was struggling. I will say, like, the only thing that makes me put this at the same tier as all the other bosses in the last 5 or 6 entries is that first phase. I wish the first phase was only like maybe the first third of the fight rather than the first half. And the reason is because some of his attacks can be a little bit frustrating. Those like delayed AoEs and ranged attacks aren't super awesome. And the second half is just so good that I wish it was more of the fight. However, the difficulty of that second half is so high, I don't know if I could have handled a longer phase of that. Maybe if they toned down his damage, but I think that second half of this fight, after the transformation, is potentially my favorite of any FromSoft fight ever. The one thing is that I still have yet to learn how to dodge some of the attacks, despite facing him over 50 times in my first playthrough. But just the way he actually uses like the pillars in the arena to jump on them, it feels like you're actually fighting a real thing rather than like a coordinated AI or something like that. Just the movements are so unique to this boss. The Black Blade looks amazing. I love his armor. I love the way he moves around so quickly, has the ranged attacks. It's such a thrill to dodge every single one. And the damage over time keeps you on your toes. You really have to be careful. Absolutely amazing boss to top out my list in an amazing game full of amazing bosses. And I really want to know what you guys think. So make sure you leave down below your ranking of all the bosses. Check out my rankings for some of the other games, as well as my rankings of my top 20 Soulsborne tracks, previous to Elden Ring's release, of course, on my main channel where I do more music stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed this amazing game.